No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, there's a lot at stake this November.
Voters have a real chance this election to make their voices heard.
More Texans are registered to vote than ever before, but one group typically gets left behind on Election Day.
It's up to us to defy expectations, to get people out regardless of which party they're voting for.
The push to get young Texans to the polls and how that could change this year's election. A new challenger takes on a veteran Texas congressman.
He's been focusing on Washington, D.C. issues instead of Texas 10 issues.
We'll look closer at the candidates behind the campaign for a key U.S. House district. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. The deadline to register to vote is this Tuesday. Texas has already reached a record when it comes to the registered voters, many of them young Texans. History tells us those young voters usually don't show up at the polls, but as Alyssa Gord shows us, there are new efforts underway to change that history.
Early voting is October 22nd. How do you vote? Just go in with your ID.
Students like Andrew Herrera are fielding questions and getting their peers registered.
Almost every college student moves in between year to year, so the big thing is having to do change of addresses.
Both sides, I think, are very motivated and very excited and have things they want to go vote on.
But there hasn't always been this momentum in Texas.
Our elderly voters are participating fine, just about the same as other states, but the young voters are not.
Grace Shemaine is with the nonpartisan group League of Women Voters in Texas. Her team is using text reminders and online voter guides to get more young adults to the polls.
I think this election is going to be different because it is competitive, it's exciting. Voters have a real chance this election to make their voices heard.
UT students say state and national politics are also stirring up tension. These students already know who they'll vote for in the Senate race.
Beto O'Rourke.
Ted Cruz.
But at the end of the day, they both just want to see as many of their peers voting as possible.
And I would encourage them to, if you care about that opinion, to go make it known and vote.
They don't expect you to vote even with all of that, so it's up to us to defy expectations, to get people out regardless of which party they're voting for.
Alyssa Gord for State of Texas.
The number of registered voters in Texas hit a new high last month. More than 15.6 million Texans are registered to vote in the midterm election. That's up 11% from the last midterm. The increase outpaces the population growth in Texas. More than 28 million people now live in the state. That's up 6.5% from 2014. For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. Jeremy Wallace reports for the Houston Chronicle, and James Berrigan covers Texas government for the Dallas Morning News. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh.
So voter registration hit record numbers in Texas recently. What does that tell us about the election? Who benefits?
It's unclear to me who's going to benefit. I think at the beginning of the year, you could have said that Democrats were going to benefit just based on the discontent that there is with people and the president and his temperament and the way that sort of he behaves. So I think that Republicans maybe were happy with the business aspect of it, but weren't so happy about how he behaves and maybe weren't as active or as willing to be active in this midterm election. But now I think with the midterm elections, I think that's maybe changing and that there's a resurgence in voting on both sides.
Well, I think certainly since March, you know, when you think of like adding 400,000 voters just since that time period, that is what Texas was adding per year, you know, over the last 4 years. We did that in a very short window. And so I think that tells me the energy, you know, around the U.S. Senate race and around just all these competitive congressional races we have in Texas has really kind of, you know, brought more people to want to register and get more participation in these races.
Now, there's been a lot of outreach to young voters, but we know, from traditionally they're less likely to vote oftentimes. Do you think this year is going to be any different?
Yeah, to borrow a phrase from a cult film classic, the problem with young voters is that we get older and they stay the same age, which means you've got to keep reaching out to them and keep teaching them how to register to vote, which way to go about doing things. So it's a constant battle, and that's been a battle that's been difficult here in Texas. I think there's been some outreach groups like Jolt that reaches out to millennial Latinos and Voto Latino that's been trying to do a lot more outreach in that part. I'm not sure that those efforts are all the way there, but they're certainly making progress.
Well, and that goes to like all first-time voters. You know, it's like it's not just the young voters who are hard to get out, but anytime you register somebody new, it's like campaigns know that those are really, you know, tough voters to get into that habit of knowing the process. You know, when do you get registered? When do you know, how do you go vote? You know, can I vote by, you know, by mail? Can I vote early? You know, and especially we have so many people in Texas coming from other places right now who had totally different rules and regulations, and so I think, you know, trying to get first-time voters becomes part of the get out the vote operation of any campaign. I know you can see it in the Beto O'Rourke campaign right now. He's on college campuses and they're really pushing the voter registration stuff. You saw even at the Willie Nelson concert, you know, to benefit, you know, him during that last weekend, that they had voter registration people walking around to register people to vote, trying to teach people how to get into the system. They love politics, clearly, right? They love music, they're out there, but how do you get those people to the polls? And that's the big question that will determine this race.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in that race, the Senate race, but do you think that with young people being so interested in that race in particular, it's going to have an impact on things that are down the ballot, like the governor's race or any congressional ones?
Absolutely, I think it does. It's, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, how do you get people out to vote? Well, you give them something they want to vote for. Get some energy into a race. So I think the one thing that O'Rourke and Cruz have both done, they have focused on energizing people. You know, like, and you got this, you know, everybody wants to, you know, be part of this, it seems like. And so there's a, once you get those people in the ballot, you know, or voting, you know, it's like you're going to see, like, I think an impact down the ballot for both of them, you know. And so that's why there's so much pressure on both of them to get their bases out, because they have a ability to affect all the races down the ballot if they get their people out. They're at the top of the ticket. It's like, you know, you're going to be seeing the U.S. Senate race on the top, you know, before you get to the governor's race or state house seats or whatever else. And so they kind of set the tone for the entire electorate.
All right. James, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have, I think, protected Americans from a lot of the threats that I see as a nation.
An influential Texas congressman faces a new challenger.
And I think the big distinguishing factor between me and McCall is that I'm really on the side of the people.
We go one-on-one with the challenger and the congressman as they make their case to voters. Campaigns to represent you in Congress are heating up. One race in Central Texas pits a longtime incumbent against a political newcomer. District 10 stretches from northwest Austin all the way to the western suburbs of Houston. Congressman Michael McCall, who is from Austin, has represented the district since 2005. Mike Siegel is challenging McCall. He's a teacher and civil rights lawyer in Austin. Our Phil Prazen spoke with Siegel about his ideas for people in District 10.
Why should somebody, when presented with a choice, vote for you instead of Chairman McCall?
Sure. So I think, first of all, I'm someone that's a public servant. I've been serving the community for 20 years as a public school teacher, civil rights lawyer, and city attorney, and I'm dedicated to helping people improve their lives. And I think the big distinguishing factor between me and McCall is that I'm really on the side of the people. His campaigns have been supported by corporate money. He's been focusing on Washington, D.C. issues instead of Texas 10 issues. And so I'm focused on protecting our safety net, you know, protecting Social Security, ensuring everyone has health care, making sure we have adequate flood control and internet connectivity. The bread and butter issues, they really make a difference in people's lives.
And so what are some policy decisions that he has made that you would not make?
You know, what got me into this race was McCall's vote to gut the Affordable Care Act without having any replacement in place. You know, I know how important that law is for many, many people across Texas and this country. For example, I have a cousin who wouldn't have been able to receive a liver transplant, but for the protections in that law for pre-existing conditions. So to me, that fight for health care for every single Texan is extremely important for me, and it's something where McCall has been on the wrong side.
So what would you advocate for health care if you go to Congress, I guess?
That's right. As the representative for the people in this district, I will fight for health care for all, whether that means extending Medicare for everyone or some other universal approach to make sure every single American has access to health care in this country.
Have you met people who say, you know, that view just doesn't match up with the view of the district, and then what do you say to those people who say that?
You know, by and large, I find that just about everyone in this district wants health care, whether you're talking about teachers or retired individuals or young professionals. Health care is a huge issue, it's a huge need, and it's too expensive and not enough people have it, and even the programs people have are inadequate for their needs. And so people do have some questions about the cost of health care. And where I start is that it's a moral imperative. I mean, we are a wealthy enough country where everyone should have health care. And there are ways to pay for it. I mean, for example, most recently, McCall supported a $1.5 trillion tax cut. Instead of that tax cut, we could be making sure more Texans have health care.
Now, when we talk about the tax cut with him, to the question of can we afford this, he points to the economy and says, the deficit's bad, but it's not as bad if we grow our way out of it, and the tax cuts have been, the fuel to this economy. I mean, don't you think that people are somewhat living pretty well in the economy right now?
You know, I think there's a big difference between the stock market and regular working folks. And so unfortunately, with a $7.25 minimum wage, you can have people that are employed but still aren't surviving. They still can't support their family. They still don't have enough time to be with their children because they're working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. So I think what the tax cut did is it gave the wealthy a lot more money, and unfortunately we know that trickle-down economics doesn't work. A huge number of these corporations that got big tax cuts just gave that money back to their shareholders. It didn't go back into improving jobs, improving benefits, employing more Americans. So really the benefits are not going to where they're needed most.
Is health care going to be your priority if someone elects you to Congress, or is there another issue that you would really champion as your #1 issue?
You know, I think I would choose 2. I think healthcare is #1. I would support efforts to expand healthcare across the country. I also think infrastructure is a huge need in this district. You know, about 10 years ago, the Army Corps of Engineers said that the 2 major dams in the Houston area at the other end of this district were in imminent danger of catastrophic failure. And unfortunately, Congress, including McCall, didn't step up to reinforce those dams, and then we had Hurricane Harvey. And so we need massive infrastructure investment, not just to protect against 10 and 25-year floods, but unfortunately the increasingly prevalent 100-year and even larger floods.
And so how would you pay for some of that?
Well, I think it's really a question of choices. I mean, like Mr. McCall says, there was enough money to pay for the tax cuts. Why isn't there enough money to pay for the basic needs of the people? So there is this ability of the government to spend money. And I think if we invest in things like broadband internet, you know, 80 years ago we extended electricity to everywhere in Texas. We need to do that with fast internet now. And that's going to improve the economy. It's going to create new jobs and opportunities.
So you want to need to raise taxes or revenue for this? This could all be done in the existing budget in the federal government?
Yes, I think we can adopt a different tax structure that brings in more revenue, especially from, for example, some of these corporations that right now are receiving welfare and unnecessary tax benefits. But I also think that some of these things are such moral imperatives, whether you're talking about a decent retirement or you're talking about health care, that it is worth it that the government spends the money and we can figure out how to pay for it later.
Siegel is an underdog to incumbent Michael McCall. The congressman has a strong background in Homeland Security.
I've passed a lot of major cybersecurity bills out of the Congress to help better protect the country.
We'll hear from the congressman next about what he'll do if voters send him back to Washington. We're taking a closer look at key congressional races in Texas. Michael McCall has represented District 10 since 2005, and he's become a force in Homeland Security. KXAN political reporter Phil Prazen spoke one-on-one with the congressman.
You are on the ballot. Mike Siegel's running against you. For someone who's just turned on the TV or maybe just moved to the district, why should somebody vote for you instead of Mike Siegel?
Well, you know, I've been chairman of the Homeland Security Committee for the last 6 years. I've protected Americans from a lot of the threats that I see as a nation. Our economy is booming right now because of the tax cuts that we implemented. We have here locally in Austin, Apple reinvesting $350 billion into Austin and Texas and in the United States, mostly in part because of that tax cut. Also, ExxonMobil. A lot of these companies are reinvesting dollars. I think unemployment's at all-time low, consumer confidence at all-time high, GDP is going up, and so if you're worried about your wages and your living standards, I think we've done a pretty good job on that. In addition to, I think, protecting Americans from the threats that I see.
Going forward, what keeps you up at night?
Cybersecurity is always a huge issue, whether it be the elections to hacking into the power grid to financial institutions. I've passed a lot of major cybersecurity bills out of the Congress to help better protect the country through the Department of Homeland Security from these cyber attacks, but we'll continue to have that, moving forward. And so I see really those.
From 2 years ago when, we had the influence in the 2016 election, do you think we have gone far enough to protect something like that from happening now in 2018?
Yeah, and I got the original, what they call Gang of Eight briefing on that. I called out to denounce Russia and Putin for what they were doing, and that there should be consequences to those actions. I still feel the same way. He's not our friend. He's not an ally. He's an enemy of the United States. And I think we need to be on guard in the midterm elections that they may be trying to do this again. Can they influence the machines themselves? Probably not. We've fortified the Department of Homeland Security to work with states when they request assistance to protect those systems. But can they send out disinformation, campaign warfare, they call it? Yeah. Of course. And they will probably do that in the midterms like they did in the last presidential election.
Border security, are you happy with where we've gone in the last 2 years?
We can do more. We appropriated about $2 billion to put technology down there. I was a little disappointed in my bill to advance appropriation for $25 billion to help fortify both physical barriers, technology, and aviation assets. We wanted to fix the legal loopholes so we don't have these children coming from Central America. And we wanted to fix the DACA system so these kids don't have the anxiety of that situation. So unfortunately, it failed by a very narrow margin. Unfortunately, every Democrat voted against it. So we're going to take another look at that probably after the election, what they call the lame duck session, and see if we can get it passed then.
What would you like to see done with DACA?
I think that the kids, not the whole dreamers, but I think the ones who were either signed up for DACA or DACA eligible at that time should be given legal status in this country. And I think most Americans agree with that, and that's what our bill did. I think we need to address it because it's going to come back again.
Your opponent in the election, Mike Siegel, comes out and he says that you were supportive of the Trump's family separation policy. Is that true?
I think it's very unfortunate that sometimes politicians aren't very accurate in their when they throw out misrepresentations. This is clearly one of them. I have a statement that I came out almost directly after family separation, came out condemning this and calling for the president to reverse this policy. And in fact, he signed an executive order doing so. Then I was on Fox News Sunday speaking to the nation right after this policy was put in place, calling it inhumane and saying it was not the face of America and really condemning it. So I don't know where this is coming from, but I think the record's pretty clear.
If voters send you back for the next 2 years, you show up in January, and what's going to be the priority for you?
Well, my term ends as chairman of Homeland, which will be it's been a great experience, and I think we've done a lot of good protecting the American people. We stopped probably 99% of the plots out there against Americans. But chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I think seeing the rise and fall of ISIS under my tenure, the caliphate has crumbled. Our threat level has gone down from radical Islamist terror, I think, since that time. Still there, but it's gone down. But I think the biggest threats, as I see it now, are foreign adversary nations like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And I think as chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee, I can take those issues head on in foreign policy, which has never been more important than today.
That was Phil Prazan speaking with McCall. You heard the congressman mention his bid to lead the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That bid hinges on whether Republicans maintain control of the House. Right now, the GOP holds a 42-seat majority in Congress.
More immigrant children make the move to a tent city in Texas. It's bringing new calls for change to the country's immigration policy. How a Texas congressman is trying to reach across the aisle and beyond the border to find solutions.
The population of an immigration tent city for children in far west Texas is rising. Hundreds of children have been moved from facilities around the country to the tents in Tornillo near El Paso. The children are all between 13 and 17 years old. They came to this country as unaccompanied minors. The Tornillo tent city was supposed to be a temporary overflow shelter, but one official at Tornillo says it's now turning into a more permanent facility. It now holds more than 1,600 children. Two congressmen from different parties are trying to lead the way on solutions on immigration policies. Texas Republican Will Hurd and California Democrat Pete Aguilar joined NBC political correspondent Steve Kornacki last week at the Texas Tribune Fest in Austin. Congressman Hurd spoke about a bipartisan immigration bill. It would shield dreamers from deportation and would seek to address problems in Central America to curb illegal immigration.
We know what the root causes are of causing people from places like the Northern Triangle to come to the United States. Lack of economic opportunity. It is also violence. Violence by criminal gangs, violence by drug trafficking organizations, and violence against women. So it's the husband beating the wife and the kids, right? So when you address those root causes, you actually see a decrease in people coming from those communities.
Representative Hurd is in a tight race against Democrat Gina Ortiz-Jones. Their district includes several border counties. Voters have alternated between choosing Democratic and Republican representatives in recent elections. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.